you need to make decisions in the way that a CEO would. If you want to succeed in this business, most people aren't making decisions out of fear and scarcity. They're not stepping back and looking at their business in the way that a CEO would, where they want their business to be 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now. It really comes back to simplifying things. Once you reach your goals, whether that's a revenue goal, a time goal, or a mixture of both, that's when we can start talking about adding other things on.
Hey there, I'm Kaylin Wood, and this is Money Matters for Moms, the show where busy moms turn overwhelm into abundance. Each week we'll talk side hustles, saving hacks, wealth tips, and some energy tips to help make it all stick. Real tools for real financial freedom. No ramen required. I'm here with Stephanie Blake. She is a business coach and a productivity expert and the founder of the Simple Business School, and she's helped thousands of people to increase their revenue while working 20 hours a week or less. So can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing before you started your business?
It is a long story, which I will try to keep it short and condense it. So essentially, I was on the very traditional track that most people go down, right? You go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you work at that job forever until you retire. So that's the path that I was on because that's what my mom did. And she was a single mom raising us. I basically followed in her footsteps. So I started on that journey, got my degree in graphic design, started working at an engineering company, designing instruction manuals, which, as you can imagine, was incredibly boring. There is nothing more boring than designing an instruction manual for an engineering company. After a couple of years, I realized, okay, this was not the right path for me. I wanted to do something more fulfilling with my life. So I moved out of my hometown to the city of Chicago and got a job at a digital marketing agency. And about 2 or 3 years into that job, I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break, and I was hit with this ad telling you how to use the skills from your corporate life and start your own business online. And immediately I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. Like, I can do that. I'm helping all of these people. Well, at this time, the agency that I was working with, we focused on franchises. So there were all of these business owners, entrepreneurs that I was supporting reach their goals. So I thought, okay, why can't I do this too? Like, why can't I start my own business? I'm helping all these other people do it. So I started my business after that, right? Signed up for training, got started that first year in business. I had 9 different businesses because I was just so excited. So excited, also so distracted. There were so many shiny objects, right? Because I mean, it's the online world. You can do anything. Anything can make you money, right? Now more than ever, I feel like all of the ideas and the ways that we can make money have just 10, 20 inches in the past couple of years. Basically, I started out doing that, did anything that you can think of, and settled into virtual assistant work. And I did that for a little while, did that as a solopreneur, and then I built that into an agency while I was working in my 9-to-5 job. Then I found out I was pregnant with my first son. And at that point, I was working 80 to 100 hours a week, basically working nonstop. Didn't see my husband at that time. We were newly married. Didn't really see him because I was just working constantly because I wanted to reach this goal, right? But then I was just hit with this realization of, holy crap, I'm pregnant. I have a baby growing inside of me. I'm going to be a mom. So that was my catalyst, not only realizing that I had to go full time in my business because I couldn't work in this job, be a mom, and run this business on this. Like, that was just not an option. But most importantly, it led me to realize that I could not work all of the time like I was doing before. If you have conceived a baby, growing a baby inside of you, that first trimester, very difficult, very, very hard. Knocked the wind out of me. Second trimester was okay. Third one, again, I was done. But I realized in that first trimester, I was not able to do much, right? Because I was just so exhausted. So like all I could really do was the work at my job that was actually paying the bills, and then focus very specifically on the things that I had to do in my business. And that's what I did. And that's when I accidentally created this formula that I now teach today, showing people how to run their business in less than 20 hours a week, because it came out of necessity for me more than anything, because I could not work more than that.
I'm really impressed with the fact that you understood from what you were going through in pregnancy that you wouldn't be able to continue the work like you had been when you actually had the baby, because I know I was like, oh, as soon as I'm done with this part of the pregnancy, having the baby is going to be so much easier, right?
Thank you. I mean, I kind of recognized that when I first got pregnant, and I was just tired constantly. And I was like, okay, I made the decision then that I had to leave that 9 to 5 job. And then 2 weeks before I had my son was when I left my 9 to 5 job. So then I was with this newborn baby, but also raising this newborn business, because although this business had been running successfully in the background, it was now its own thing that had to provide for my family on top of my husband's job. I agree with you. I knew what my limits were, but there was also this sense of maternal instinct that kicked in, where it was like, okay, I have to take care of this baby, but I also have to take care of my family. So this business cannot fail. I have to pay my bills. So it was kind of like a sense of knowing what I needed to do and then just doing what I had to do in order to survive.
So by the time you brought your son, you were already constricting your hours to 20 hours a week at home.
Yeah, and then he was born, and I was still on that 20-hour a week schedule, just again, out of necessity, because I had to be like, I had this little baby, right? And I was there for him as much as I could be when he was awake. And then when he was sleeping, it was all about the nap time hustle. I'm sure people in this community are familiar with that. Nap time hustle was a real thing, but he was actually a pretty good sleeper. Second son. That is, yeah, I mean, again, just doing what you have to do in those hours, in those very small windows when you can do it. And as a mom, I think that we are superheroes. I mean, multitude of ways, but really when it comes to being efficient with the limited amount of time that we have, whether you're working in a career or you're running a business, those little pockets of the day where you can find time to either give back to yourself or do the work that you need to be doing, just what I did.
So if other people wanted to emulate what you did, what's the first thing that they should do?
The most important thing that you can do is to keep things as simple as possible. And when I talk about simplicity, so I'm talking really to the business owners here, right? So when we're thinking about a business, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on solving one problem. So you need to understand the problem that your business is solving. And then you need to sell an offer that solves that problem. That could be a service, that could be a product, whatever it is. And then really understanding who you're solving that problem for, understanding where that person is online so that you can market effectively to them, and then also understanding how to convey the value that you bring to solve that problem for that person. So again, it's one thing that you're focusing on, because once you do that, you will simplify everything else in your business. And you will become known as the go-to person for that specific thing that you are really great at.
So can you tell us your favorite way to stop burnout before it happens?
Yeah. So guess what I'm going to say? I'm going to tell you to keep it simple. So the big thing that I see people doing is trying to do too much. And this happens for, I mean, a variety of reasons, right? Whether it's you don't know what you need to be doing, or you don't feel confident in yourself or the problem that you're solving, or you're just looking at what everybody else is doing and you're trying to copy it without really understanding what's happening behind the scenes of their businesses. Because nobody's going to tell you the icky things that are happening behind the scenes. Like when you're scrolling through social media and you see all the smiling photos of people, all you see are their smiling photos. So you try to follow the strategies that they're doing when they don't even make sense for your business. It really comes back to simplifying things, right? Simplifying and understanding the one problem that you're solving and having one offer to sell to solve that problem. Once you reach your goals, whether that's a revenue goal, a time goal, or a mixture that's when we can start talking about adding other things on. Because the reality of the situation is you are running a business, you are running a company. You need to act like the business owner, the CEO of this company, and make decisions in the way that a CEO would if you want to succeed in this business. And most people are not making decisions aligned with that. They're making decisions out of fear and scarcity the vast majority of the time. They're not stepping back and looking at their business in the way that a CEO would and making long-term decisions that benefit not only their business right now, but where they want their business to be 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now. That's where that fear and that scarcity comes in, because people are constantly trying to create new ideas or create new offers just to generate some quick cash. But what they're actually doing is they're slowing down that timeline to reach their goal because they're just overwhelming everything happening in the back end of their business, and they're confusing their audience because their audience has no idea what they do or what they're really great at.
So, speaking of goals, I know that one of your goals was to retire your husband from his 9 to 5 job, and you were able to do that. Congratulations. So, what advice can you share with other women who would like to do the same thing?
So, this was one of my big goals from the day that I started my business. I knew that this was something that I wanted because I wanted freedom more than anything for our family. But when it came down to the decision and the actual action steps we had to take in order for this to happen, I'm going to say something that you're probably not going to think I'm going to say. Because most people will talk about, well, you have to crunch the numbers, right? You have to make sure you have a certain amount of money. You know finances, right? Obviously, the finances are important. You also have to understand things like he was in a 9 to 5 job, right? So he took care of our health insurance, our life insurance. It all went through the company. So then all of a sudden we had to learn about these things that we had no idea about. Health insurance as a business owner is very confusing if you don't know anything about health insurance or if you've never done it before. It's also not cheap. I'm going to be very honest with you. Also, life insurance. We don't know anything about this. So that was really like the biggest realization that I had after we made this decision was, holy crap, there's so much stuff that we didn't know about that we had to do. So yes, numbers are important, but there's also these other outlying things that you have to make sure that you're taking care of. And we had the goal for him to leave the year prior. So the year prior to that, August 2021, I think, was when we said he was going to leave. We got scared. It didn't happen. Then I said, okay, my birthday is in April. That is when it's going to happen. So you're putting in your 2 weeks notice on my birthday. I don't care what's going on in our life. I don't care if we're scared. You're going to do it. And he did it. And it was terrifying. And 2 days later, I found out I was pregnant. Scary, right? Like talk about terrifying. And that's where that health insurance comes in, right? Because maternity health insurance is completely different from like normal people health insurance. So it was like all of these things were coming up. We didn't know how to manage it. And all of a sudden I started to have this fear too. Again, not something that people will tell me about. Like, holy crap, I am the sole provider for my family right now. What is going on? So like I had all of these mindset issues come up that I had to work through. My husband and I had never been together in the house at the same time outside of weekends, right? Because he was working in his job during the day. He would come home at night. We would have dinner, maybe like watch something on TV, and then we would go to bed. Repeat. Now we're around each other all of the time. He's in my space when I'm going to be in my space. So that was also something that, again, we didn't think about. And I don't think a lot of other people think about too. Like the idea of retiring your husband, having them pursue their dreams, if that's something that they want to do, or just, again, having that freedom and flexibility to do what you want when you want to. It sounds great in theory. Like, who wouldn't want that? But it's hard. It's very hard. We got into a lot of arguments in those first couple of months because he was in the kitchen when I was supposed to be in the kitchen eating lunch, right? We didn't set the expectations that we needed to set in terms of the role that he was playing in the household versus the role that I was playing. It was just something we didn't think about. We're like, oh, we'll figure it out. So going back to that question of like, what advice would you share is one, have an actual conversation with your partner about this. Talk about what actually is going to happen. Again, not just with the finances, but with your relationship. Because if you do not have a firm foundation in your relationship, if you're on rocks or you think it's going to save your relationship, whatever, it will not. I guarantee it will tear you apart because it's a completely different dynamic that you are now putting yourself into. So that would be my biggest advice. Just have a conversation with your partner. Make sure that you are 100% on the same page. And then also think about the things that you didn't have to think about before, right? Like the health insurance, the life insurance, the savings accounts, like all of these different things that were taken care of previously by his employer that now we're like, oh, now we have to figure all of this other stuff out. So now it's great. Now things are great. And we're moving one step closer every day toward our really, really big goals and dreams. But I will not say that it has been easy.
And you must have had ongoing conversations, right? Because you don't necessarily know what's going to be problematical until you're in the middle of it.
Absolutely. If you're somebody who doesn't really communicate well, you're going to need to learn how to, right? Because you are going to be with this person, assuming you're working at home, they're in the house with you, you're going to be around this person all of the time. So you need to make sure that you set your own boundaries for that as well.
You retired your husband, but you continued to work 20 hours a week, but you were able to support your family on that.
Remember when I said that there were some like mindset issues that came up in the process? The first couple of months when that happened, I got scared. I'll just be very honest. I got scared. I was like, shoot, I'm the only one making money. I have to make more money. I have to work more to make more money. So for a little bit of time, I reverted back to those old habits because that's what we do. When in doubt, we go back to those old habits of things that we have done in the past. My old habit was working nonstop because that's what I was used to. Even though I had developed the system, I reverted back to that because I did not do the necessary trauma healing and mindset work to remind myself that, no, Stephanie, you don't actually have to work more to make more money. You actually don't. You've figured out how to not do that. Eventually, I realized this. I came back to myself and was able to get back into that 20-hour week. But I will not lie to you and say that it was easy. No, I did have a little setback there in the middle where I had to kind of get very real with myself and remind myself. So my goal with everybody that I work with is to work 20 hours a week or less.
That sounds fantastic. And thank you so much for coming here and sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Money Matters for Moms. I hope today's episode left you inspired to take one little step forward. Check out the resources in the show notes and share this with another mom who's ready to thrive. You've got this, because abundance is easier than you might think.